They say the human brain is hardwired to fear the dark, but I don't think that's quite right. We don't fear the dark, we fear what we can't see within it. We fear the suspension of our primary sense, the way the world shrinks to the size of our own skin the moment the lights go out. I used to be a rational man. I dealt in data, in cold, hard metrics, and in the predictable physics of structural engineering. But that was before the morning of the 14th. Now, I don't trust the silence. I don't trust the way a shadow stretches across a hallway. And more than anything else, I live with the soul-crushing regret of a single, impulsive decision. If I could go back, if I could reach through the fabric of time and grab my own hand, I would scream at myself to stay in bed. I would tell myself that no matter how persistent the sound was, no matter how much my curiosity burned, I should never have answered that knock at 2:17 a.m. To understand why I opened that door, you have to understand the isolation I lived in. I moved to a small, unincorporated patch of land in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains about 3 years ago. I'd spent a decade in Northern Virginia, grinding away in a windowless office, calculating the load-bearing capacities of bridges I'd never cross. The burnout was real, a heavy, gray fog that settled over my life until I finally decided to cash out. I bought a house that was, quite literally, at the end of the road. It was a modest, two-story craftsman built in the late 70s, tucked into a dense stand of white pines and oaks. My nearest neighbor was a mile and a half down the winding gravel drive, an elderly man named Arthur who kept to himself and his orchard. My life was a study in solitude. My routine was a clockwork of quietude. I'd wake up at 7:30 a.m., the sun barely cresting the ridge, and spend my morning on the back deck with a French press and the sound of the wind through the needles. My work was all remote now, freelance consulting for firms in the city. I'd sit in my second-floor office, staring at blueprints and spreadsheets until the sun dipped behind the mountains. By 6:00 p.m. I was done. Dinner was usually something simple, followed by a book or a movie, and I was typically in bed by 11:00 p.m. I liked the silence. I thought I needed it. I thought the lack of human noise was a luxury, a form of spiritual wealth that most people would never know. I didn't realize that silence is a vacuum, and eventually, something always rushes in to fill it. The first time I heard the sound, I thought it was a branch. We had a particularly dry autumn, and the trees were brittle, shedding limbs with every stiff breeze. It was a Tuesday. I remember the date clearly because I just finished a grueling project on the Piedmont Viaduct. I was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep fatigue that makes your vision swim. I had fallen asleep on the sofa in the living room, a half-finished glass of bourbon on the coffee table, and the television hissing with the blue static of a lost signal. The sound was sharp, knock, knock, knock. I sat up, my heart doing a jagged dance against my ribs. The room was pitch black, save for the flickering blue light of the TV. My first instinct was to check the time. The digital clock on the microwave in the open-concept kitchen glowed with an eerie neon precision. 2:17 a.m. I stayed perfectly still, my ears straining so hard they felt like they were vibrating. In a house that remote, a knock at 2:17 a.m. isn't a visitor. It isn't a neighbor in trouble, it's a threat. I thought about the gravel driveway. I hadn't heard a car. In the dead of night, the sound of tires on those loose stones carries for miles. It's a rhythmic, crunching sound that signals an arrival long before the headlights hit the trees. But there had been nothing. Just the silence, and then those three distinct, measured raps on the wood. I stood up, my bare feet cold on the hardwood floor. I crept toward the front door, my breath coming in shallow, silent sips. The house felt different in the dark, cavernous, as if the walls had expanded while I slept. I reached the entryway and stood by the small, frosted window beside the door. I didn't turn on the porch light. I didn't want to announce my position. I just peered out into the darkness. The white pines stood like sentinels in the yard, their branches swaying slightly in the night air. The porch was empty. I could see the wicker chair I usually sat in, the small side table, the potted ferns that were starting to brown. Everything was exactly as it should be. I told myself it was a bird, or perhaps a raccoon that had climbed onto the porch and bumped against the door. I waited for 10 minutes, my hand hovering over the deadbolt, before I finally convinced myself I was being paranoid. I went back to the sofa, but I didn't go back to sleep. I stared at the microwave clock until the numbers changed to 300, then 400, then finally 500. The next few days were a slow descent into a quiet, simmering anxiety. You don't realize how much you rely on the predictable nature of your environment until it fails you. Every time I walked past the front door, I felt a slight chill, a tightening in my solar plexus. I started checking the perimeter of the house before sunset. I walked the gravel drive, looking for tire tracks that shouldn't be there or footprints in the soft dirt near the flower beds. I found nothing. No crushed grass, no disturbed earth. It was as if the sound had been conjured out of the air itself. I tried to rationalize it. I'm a man of science after all. Wood expands and contracts with temperature changes. The house was 40 years old. The joints groan, the foundation settles. A sudden drop in temperature, very common in the mountains, could easily cause a sound that mimics a knock. I clung to that explanation like a life raft. I repeated it to myself as I brushed my teeth, as I made my coffee, as I sat at my desk and tried to focus on the stress-strain curves of a new bridge design. It's just the house, it's just physics. But then came Friday. I had gone to bed early, hoping to catch up on the sleep I'd lost earlier in the week. I was in a deep, dreamless state when the sound tore through my consciousness. Knock, knock, knock. I bolted upright, my skin instantly slick with a cold sweat. I didn't even have to look at the clock, but I did. The red digits of the bedside alarm glared back at me. 2:17 a.m. This time the knocks weren't polite. They were heavy. They had a weight to them, a deliberate force that made the door frame rattle in its housing. And this time there was something else. A sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was a soft, wet sliding sound, like a heavy bag being dragged across the porch boards. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the heavy maglite I kept in the nightstand and ran down the stairs. My fear had been replaced by a sharp, jagged spike of adrenaline. I wanted to catch them. I wanted to see the face of the person who was terrorizing my peace. I reached the door and flicked the switch for the outdoor floodlights. The yard was instantly bathed in a harsh, artificial white light. I looked through the side window, nothing. I threw open the door, the maglite held like a club. The air was freezing, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the house. I stepped onto the porch, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the mist. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking in the cold air. "I have a gun. Get off my property." I didn't have a gun, but I hoped the lie would carry enough weight to scare off any local teenagers looking for a thrill. I walked to the edge of the porch, the maglite scanning the tree line. The woods were silent, not even a cricket. The world felt as if it had been vacuum sealed. I looked down at the porch boards. There were no wet streaks, no signs of anything being dragged, but there was something. On the welcome mat, perfectly centered, was a small object. I knelt down, my heart hammering. It was a stone, a smooth, gray river stone about the size of a golf ball. I picked it up. It was ice cold. There are no river stones on my property. The ground here is all shale and red clay. The nearest creek is 3 miles away, down at the bottom of the ridge. Someone had brought this here. Someone had walked onto my porch, knocked 3 times at exactly 2:17 a.m., left a rock, and vanished into the woods without making a sound. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in the kitchen with every light in the house turned on, the river stone sitting on the table in front of me like a ticking bomb. Who would do this? Why the specific time? 2:17 a.m. wasn't just a random hour, it was a signature. It was an appointment. The following week was a blur of exhaustion and paranoia. I stopped working. I couldn't focus on blueprints when every creak of the floorboard sounded like a footstep. I spent my days installing security cameras. I put one over the front door, one at the back, and 2 covering the driveway. I spent a fortune on high-definition, night vision equipment that promised to capture even the slightest movement. I felt a temporary sense of relief as I watched the live feeds on my monitor. I had reclaimed the visual field. I could see the dark now. I was no longer blind. But the cameras showed me things that only deepened my dread. On Monday night, I watched the feed for hours. Around midnight, the motion light at the end of the driveway triggered. I zoomed in, my heart in my throat. It was a deer. A large buck, its eyes glowing like embers in the infrared light. It stood in the middle of the gravel, staring directly at the camera for a long time. Then it did something strange. It didn't bolt. It simply lowered its head and began to back away, its movements stiff and unnatural, as if it were trying to avoid something that was standing right behind it. On Tuesday, the cameras captured nothing but the wind in the TREs, but when I woke up and checked the porch, there was another stone, a bit larger this time, darker. I checked the footage from 2:17 a.m. The screen showed the porch bathed in the gray-green glow of night vision. At 2:16:55, the time stamp ticked forward. 2:16:56, 2:16:57. At exactly 2:17:00, the camera flickered. A sudden burst of static obscured the image for exactly 3 seconds. When the picture cleared, the stone was there. No person, no movement, just the sudden appearance of the object. I watched the clip 50 times. I analyzed the frame rates. I'm an engineer. I know how digital artifacts work. A camera doesn't just flicker and miss a person walking onto a porch, placing an object and leaving all within 3 seconds. It's physically impossible, unless they weren't walking, unless they weren't there in the way we understand it. I called Arthur, my neighbor, that afternoon. I needed to hear a human voice. I needed to know if he'd seen anything strange. "Arthur, it's Elias from up the road," I said when he picked up. "Sorry to bother you, but have you had any visitors lately? Anyone wandering around the woods?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the heavy, wet rattle of Arthur's breathing. He was 90, and the years were catching up to him. "Visitors?" he rasped. "Elias, nobody comes up this far unless they're lost or they're looking for trouble. Why, you seeing something?" "I've had someone knocking on my door," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Late, like really late, and they're leaving things on my porch." "What kind of things?" "Stones," I said, "river stones." The silence that followed was different than the one before. It wasn't the silence of an old man thinking. It was the silence of a man who had suddenly stopped breathing. "Arthur, you still there?" "Listen to me, Elias." Arthur's voice was lower now, a sharp, urgent whisper. "Don't open that door. Whatever you do, don't you ever open that door after the sun goes down. You hear me?" "Why, who is it? What's going on?" "It's not a who," Arthur said. "It's a rhythm. Some places have a pulse that's off. My father told me about it. He said there are things that get caught in the folds of the mountain. They don't want nothing from you but your attention. They feed on it. They knock to see if the house is still full. If you answer, you're telling them the door is just a suggestion. You're inviting the rhythm in." "Arthur, that sounds like folklore. I'm looking for a real answer. Is it a squatter, a prankster?" "You think a prankster can move faster than a camera lens?" Arthur asked, his voice regaining its strength. "You stay inside, Elias. Nail the door shut if you have to, but don't you answer. Not at that hour. Not ever." He hung up before I could ask anything else. I stood in my kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, the river stones sitting on the counter. Folklore, superstition, the ramblings of an isolated old man. I told myself all of these things, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. By Thursday, the psychological tension had become a physical weight. I wasn't eating. I was vibrating with a jittery, caffeine-fueled anxiety. The house, once my sanctuary, had become a trap. Every window felt like a hole in my armor. Every shadow in the corner of my eye was a crouched figure. I started sleeping in the living room with the lights on, a kitchen knife tucked under my pillow. I was a shell of the man I had been 3 years ago. The silence was no longer a luxury. It was a threat. It was the space between the knocks, the agonizing wait for the clock to hit 2:17. I began to have auditory hallucinations. I'd be sitting in my office and I'd hear a faint, rhythmic tapping from inside the walls. Tap, tap, tap. I'd press my ear to the drywall, but the sound would shift, moving to the ceiling, then the floor. It was as if the house itself was mocking me, adopting the rhythm that Arthur had warned me about. I thought about leaving. I thought about packing a bag and driving until I hit a city with streetlights and sirens and people, but I couldn't. It's hard to explain, but there was a strange, magnetic pull to the house now. I felt like if I left, I would be leaving a part of my soul behind, trapped in that 2:17 a.m. loop. I needed to see it through. I needed to know what was on the other side of that door. Then came the night of the 14th. A storm was rolling in from the west. The sky was a bruised, sickly purple, and the wind was howling through the pines, making the house moan and groan. It was the kind of night that felt biblical, as if the world were being scoured clean. I sat on the sofa, watching the clock. 1:50 a.m. 2:00 a.m. 2:10 a.m. The wind suddenly died down. The transition was so abrupt it was jarring. One moment, the house was a cacophony of whistling air and rattling glass. The next, it was a tomb. The silence was so thick I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, a low, mechanical drone that felt like it was drilling into my skull. 2:15 a.m. 2:16 a.m. I stood up. I didn't grab the knife. I didn't grab the maglite. I walked to the front door, my movements fluid and mechanical. I felt as if I were underwater, my limbs heavy and slow. I stood in front of the door, staring at the wood. I could see the grain of the oak, the small imperfections in the finish. 2:17 a.m. The knock didn't come. I waited. 1 second, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, nothing. The silence stretched out, becoming more and more oppressive with every tick of the clock. My heart was thundering, a wild, panicked beat that seemed to fill the entire room. "Is that it?" I whispered. "Are you gone?" And then it happened, but it wasn't a knock. It was a voice. It didn't come from outside. It came from right in front of me, as if someone were standing on the other side of the door, their mouth pressed against the wood. "Elizabeth," said. It wasn't a human voice. It had the tone of a person speaking, but the texture was all wrong. It sounded like dry leaves skittering across pavement. It sounded like the grinding of stones in a riverbed. It was a hollow, echoing sound that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. "Elias, open the door. It's cold out here." I should have turned and run. I should have locked myself in the bathroom and waited for the sun. But I was broken. The weeks of sleep deprivation, the isolation, the relentless psychological pressure, it had all led to this moment. I was a man who had spent his life calculating loads and forces, and I had finally reached my breaking point. My hand moved to the deadbolt. I felt the cold metal of the latch. "Please," the voice whispered, "just a crack." I turned the bolt. The sound of the mechanism was deafening in the silence. Click. I pulled the door open. At first I saw nothing. The porch was empty, bathed in the harsh white light of the floodlights. The yard was still. The woods were black. I felt a surge of confusion, a momentary thought that perhaps I had finally lost my mind completely. But then I looked down. Standing on the welcome mat was a figure. But figure is the wrong word. It was a shape, roughly the size of a child, but its proportions were all wrong. It was thin, impossibly thin, its limbs like parched branches. It was covered in something that looked like gray, matted fur, but as I looked closer I realized it wasn't fur. It was dust. Layers and layers of thick, ancient dust, as if it had been pulled from the deepest, most forgotten corner of a basement. It had no face. Where the eyes and mouth should have been, there were only shallow indentations like thumbprints in clay. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It just stood there, a void in the light. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. My vocal cords felt like they had been turned to stone. The creature, the thing, slowly raised a limb. Its movements were jerky, like a marionette being pulled by invisible strings. It reached out and touched my foot with a cold, dry finger. The moment it touched me, the world vanished. The light of the porch, the sound of the wind, the feeling of the house, it was all gone. I was standing in a place of absolute, crushing darkness. There was no up, no down, no air. There was only the rhythm, knock, knock, knock. It was inside my head, a rhythmic pounding that felt like it was shattering my brain into 1,000 pieces. I saw images. I saw the mountain before the trees were there. I saw the earth shifting, the stones grinding against each other for eons. I saw a house being built and a man standing in the doorway staring into the dark. I saw myself, but I was different. I was gray. I was covered in dust. I was standing on a porch, knocking on a door that would never open. I don't know how long I was in that darkness. It could have been seconds. It could have been centuries. When I came to, I was lying on the porch. The sun was up, a pale, weak light filtering through the trees. The floodlights were still on, looking pathetic and orange in the daylight. The door was wide open, swinging slightly in the breeze. I scrambled to my feet, my body aching as if I'd been beaten. I ran inside and slammed the door, locking every bolt, sliding the chain, pushing the heavy entryway table in front of it. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the river stones, throwing them into the trash, then taking the trash bag out to the bin and buried it under a pile of leaves. I didn't call the police. I didn't call Arthur. I packed a bag, grabbed my laptop, and got into my car. I didn't even look back at the house as I drove down the gravel drive. I drove for 6 hours, not stopping until I was in the middle of a crowded, noisy city in Ohio. I checked into a hotel, one of those big corporate chains with hundreds of rooms and a 24-hour lobby. But the trauma didn't stay at the house. It's been 6 months now. I'm living in a small apartment in a busy part of Cincinnati. There's a bus sent up right outside my window, and the sound of traffic is a constant, comforting roar. I have a roommate now, a guy named Mike who works the night shift and plays video games until the sun comes up. I never want to be alone again. I never want to be in a place where the silence can settle. But it doesn't matter. Every night I wake up at 2:16 a.m. I lie in bed, my heart hammering, watching the red digits of the clock. I count the seconds. 2:16:55. 2:16:56. 2:16:57. 2:16:58. 2:16:59. 2:17 a.m. And then it happens. It doesn't matter that I'm on the 4th floor. It doesn't matter that there's a deadbolt and a chain. Knock, knock, knock. It's soft, it's polite. It's right there on the bedroom door. Mike doesn't hear it. I've asked him. I've sat him down and begged him to tell me if he hears anything at that hour. He just looks at me with that same look Arthur had, a mixture of pity and fear. He thinks I'm having a breakdown. He thinks the stress of the move got to me. But I know what it is. I invited the rhythm in. I opened the door, and now the door is just a suggestion. It's not just a sound anymore. I've started finding things. The first time was a month ago. I woke up and there was a river stone sitting on my pillow right next to my head. It was ice cold. The second time was last week. I was in the shower, and when I stepped out, the mirror was fogged over. Someone had written something in the condensation. Not a word, just a number. 2:17. I'm losing my mind. I know I am. I've started seeing the dust. It's everywhere. No matter how much I clean, no matter how many air purifiers I buy, a fine gray layer of dust settles over everything in my room. It smells like old earth and forgotten places. I'm tired. I'm so tired. I haven't had a full night's sleep in half a year. I see the shape in the corners of my vision now, the thin, branch-like limbs, the thumbprint face. It's not in the room with me, not yet. It's waiting. It's waiting for the rhythm to finish. I realize now that the knock wasn't a request to come in. It was a countdown. Every knock, every stone, every 2:17 a.m. wake-up call is a step closer to the end of the sequence. I don't know what happens when the countdown hits 0. I don't know what's on the other side of the rhythm. But I know one thing for certain. I shouldn't have answered that door. I should have let it knock until the wood rotted away. I should have stayed in the silence, no matter how terrifying it was. Because now, the silence is gone forever, replaced by a sound that will follow me until the day I die. And sometimes, in the darkest part of the night, when the traffic outside dies down and the city finally catches its breath, I hear the voice again. It's not a whisper anymore. It's a low, grinding vibration that comes from inside my own chest. Elias, it says, we're almost there. I'm sitting here now in the kitchen watching the clock. It's 2:14 a.m. Mike is at work, the apartment is quiet, too quiet. I've taped the bedroom door shut. I've pushed the dresser in front of the front door, but I know it won't matter. I can feel the dust starting to settle on my shoulders. I can feel the cold river stone in my pocket, even though I threw it away yesterday. The clock ticks forward. 2:15. I've started to realize that the things caught in the folds of the mountain aren't just in the mountains. They're in the fabric of the world itself. They're the glitches in the data, the static in the camera, the sound that shouldn't be there. And once you see them, once you acknowledge them, you become part of the glitch. 2:16. I'm going to go to the door. I know I am. Not because I want to, but because the rhythm demands it. My hand is already moving, my limbs feeling like parched branches, my skin feeling like it's being covered in layers of ancient, forgotten earth. 2:17. Knock, knock, knock. This time, I don't think I'll be the one opening the door. This time, I think I'm the one on the other side. I can see myself sitting at the table. I look tired. I look broken. I look like a man who has reached his load-bearing capacity. I want to tell him to run. I want to tell him to stay away from the door. But I can't. My mouth is just a thumbprint in the clay. I raise my hand. My fingers are cold and dry. Knock, knock, knock. Elias, I whisper, and the sound is like dry leaves on pavement. Open the door. It's cold out here. And the worst part, the part that will haunt me for the rest of eternity, is that I know he's going to do it. He's going to reach for the bolt. He's going to turn the latch. He's going to make the same mistake I did. Because at 2:17 a.m., in the silence of a house at the end of the road or an apartment in the heart of a city, the rhythm is the only thing left. And the rhythm always gets what it wants. The sound of the deadbolt sliding back is the last thing I hear. It's a sharp, metallic click that echoes through the void. As the door begins to creak open, I feel the world dissolve. Ing again. The kitchen, the apartment, the city, it's all falling away, replaced by that crushing, absolute darkness. But this time I'm not standing in the dark. I'm part of it. I'm the shadow in the corner. I'm the dust on the shelf. I'm the 2:17 a.m. knock that you think you can ignore, but you can't. I'm waiting for you now. I'm waiting for the night to get quiet. I'm waiting for you to be alone with your thoughts. I'm waiting for that moment when you hear a sound that doesn't belong, a branch on the window, a creak in the floor, a soft, rhythmic tapping on the wood. Don't check the clock. Don't look through the peephole. And for the love of everything that is holy, don't open the door. Because once you do, the rhythm won't stop until it's finished with you. And it's never, ever finished. I remember the river stone. I can still feel its weight in my palm, smooth and indifferent. It represents the millions of years of silence that existed before I was born, and the millions of years that will follow after I'm gone. That's what's on the other side of the door, a silence so old it has teeth. The light is fading now. The red digits of the clock are blurring into a single, bloody smear. I can feel my heart slowing down, matching the rhythm of the knocks. Thud, thud, thud. It's not a sound anymore, it's a pulse. My pulse. Your pulse. The pulse of the house. I'm closing my eyes now, not because I'm tired, but because there's nothing left to see. The darkness is complete. The rhythm is whole. Goodbye, Elias. See you at 2:17. The transition from the world of the living to the world of the rhythm isn't a sudden drop. It's a slow, agonizing stretching of the soul. You think you're you, until you realize you're just a vibration in the air. I can feel the architecture of the city around me now, not as buildings, but as a vast, interconnected network of hollow spaces. Each apartment, each bedroom, each closet is a drum, and I am the stick. I move through the walls of the Cincinnati high-rise like smoke. I don't need the hallways. I don't need the elevators. I am the static in the wires. I am the hum in the pipes. I find myself drawn to the doors, not the ones that are open, but the ones that are locked tight. The ones where someone is sitting on the other side, holding their breath, praying for the sun to come up. I see a woman on the second floor. She's a nurse, just home from a double shift. She's exhausted, her head nodding over a bowl of cereal. The clock on her stove clicks over. 2:17 a.m. I feel the impulse rise within me, a cold, mechanical necessity. I reach out. I don't have a hand, but I have a force. Knock, knock, knock. She freezes. Her spoon stays halfway to her mouth. I see the terror bloom in her eyes, a pale, flickering flame. She looks at the door. She looks at the clock. "Who is it?" she whispers. I don't answer. Not yet. I just leave a stone on her welcome mat. A smooth, gray river stone pulled from the depths of a memory I no longer own. I move on. I find a man in a studio apartment. He's a writer, surrounded by crumpled papers and empty coffee cups. He's been trying to find the right words for hours. I give him a rhythm instead. Knock, knock, knock. He doesn't ask who it is. He just stares at the door, his face pale in the light of his laptop. He's curious. He's an investigator of the human condition. He wants to know the why. He'll open the door tomorrow, or the night after, and then he'll understand that there is no why. There is only the sequence. I realize now that Arthur was wrong about one thing. We don't feed on attention. We don't want your focus. We are the focus. We are the inevitable result of a world that has forgotten how to be quiet. You build your cities and your highways and your digital clouds to drown out the old silence, but all you've done is create a million new places for us to hide. Every knock is a reminder. Every stone is a debt. I think back to my life as an engineer. I used to think that the most important part of a bridge was the steel or the concrete, but I was wrong. The most important part is the tension, the balance between the load and the resistance. That's what I am now. I am the tension in your life. I am the weight you didn't know you were carrying until it started knocking on your door at 2:17 a.m. The sun is coming up over the Ohio River. I can feel the light hitting the buildings, a painful, scouring heat that forces me back into the shadows. I retreat into the crawl spaces, the utility shafts, the gaps between the floors. I become the dust again. But don't think I'm gone. I'm just waiting for the earth to turn. I'm waiting for the shadows to stretch. I'm waiting for the clock to hit that magic, terrible number. I'm coming for you next. Not because I hate you, not because I want to hurt you, but because the rhythm needs a new voice. It needs someone who knows what it feels like to be afraid. It needs someone who understands the weight of a river stone. So the sun goes down tonight and the house starts to settle. Listen closely. Don't listen for the wind. Don't listen for the traffic. Listen for the knock. And when it comes, and it will come, remember my story. Remember Elias. Remember the man who thought he could calculate the world and ended up becoming a ghost in the machine. Keep your eyes on the clock. 2:15 a.m. 2:16 a.m. Hold your breath. 2:17 a.m. Knock, knock, knock. I'm right outside. And God help you, I think I hear you moving toward the door. The cycle continues, a relentless, repeating loop of curiosity and regret. It's funny in a dark way. We spend our whole lives wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard, wanting to know we matter. And then we finally get our wish. We get a visitor who knows our name, who knows our routine, who knows exactly when we're most vulnerable. And all we want is to go back to being invisible. I can feel the woman on the second floor now. She's standing by her door. She's reached for the handle. She's going to open it. I can feel the writer in the studio. He's standing by his window trying to see who's on the porch. He's going to open it too. And you're listening to this. You're sitting in the dark or you're lying in bed and you're wondering if this is just a story. You're wondering if you're safe in your locked room, in your busy city, in your rational life. Check your clock. How close are we? The 2:17 a.m. knock isn't just a time. It's a destination. It's the point where your reality ends and the rhythm begins. I'm already there. I'm the weight on your welcome mat. I'm the cold air at the base of your door. I'm the shadow that doesn't move when you turn on the light. I shouldn't have answered that knock. But I did. And soon you will too. I can feel your hand on the deadbolt. I can hear the metal sliding. Click. See you in the dark. The finality of it all is what stays with you, if you can call this state staying. There is no aftermath for me, only a perpetual during. I am a witness to 1,002:17 a.m.s, a silent participant in the undoing of 1,000 lives. It is a slow, cold horror, an ice age of the soul that never thaws. I remember the warmth of the sun on my back on that deck in the Blue Ridge. I remember the smell of the French press. Those memories are like old, faded photographs, curled at the edges and crumbling to ash. They don't belong to me anymore. They belong to a man who died the moment the deadbolt turned. Now I am the cold, I am the dust, I am the 2:17. I watch as the woman, the nurse, opens her door. She sees the stone. She picks it up. I feel the connection spark, a cold, blue arc of electricity between her world and mine. She's in the sequence now. She'll spend the next month looking for river stones. She'll spend her nights watching the clock. She'll buy cameras that will flicker at the wrong moment. She thinks she's fighting for her life. She doesn't realize she's just rehearsing for her role. The writer is next. He's more proactive. He's going to try to trap me. He's going to set up sensors and tripwires. He's going to document everything, thinking he can solve the mystery. He thinks he's the protagonist of a story. He doesn't realize he's just the ink. And as I move through the city, I see millions of them. Millions of little lights, each one thinking they are the center of the universe. Each one thinking their walls are solid and their doors are secure. But I know the truth. The walls are just paper, the doors are just thin slices of wood, and the silence is just a veil. I'm standing in your hallway now, or maybe I'm in your closet, or maybe I'm under your bed. It doesn't matter where I am. What matters is the time. Look at the clock. Is it 2:17 a.m.? If it is and you hear a knock, don't answer. But you will. Because you're human, and humans can't stand a question without an answer. Even if the answer is the end of everything. Knock, knock, knock. I'm waiting. Are you? The lingering fear I left behind in that house in the mountains, it's still there. Arthur moved out a month after I did. He sold his orchard and went to live with his daughter in the city. He knew. He knew that once the rhythm starts in a place, it never truly stops. The house at the end of the road is empty now. The white pines have grown over the driveway. The porch is rotting. But at 2:17 a.m., the light in the entryway still flickers, and the sound of 3 heavy knocks echoes through the empty rooms, rattling the windows and shaking the foundation. There's no one there to hear it, but the rhythm doesn't care. It doesn't need an audience. It just needs to exist. I think about the river stones I threw in the trash. They're still there, buried under layers of waste in a landfill somewhere. They are the only physical evidence that I ever existed in that house. They are my tombstone. And as I fade into the static of the city, I wonder who will be the next Elias. Who will be the next person to think that they can find peace in the isolation? Who will be the next person to hear the knock and think it's just a branch? I hope it's not you. I really do. But I can see your hand moving toward the door. I can feel the curiosity burning in your chest. I can hear the click of the deadbolt. Goodbye. Welcome to the 217.